Well, today we're going to be talking about bank feeds and how we can save time with bank feeds. Now, Carrie, you don't like bank feeds, or you
Well, okay.
but your familiarity with bank feeds is explain yourself.
So, wow, I just got thrown under the bus here. No, so yes, bank feeds are fantastic when you can get them to work, right? So we have two products that do it completely different. And I'm so frustrated. I told Dan he's got to come in and help me set mine up right. So I'm hoping I'm starting at ground zero so that you can hear what somebody who doesn't really work with them is frustrated about.
So did
So
you so did you have what was the frustration that you had with the bank feeds? They just didn't connect, or they disconnected, or what happened?
well, so in QuickBooks Desktop, you have your section to go set them up, and of course, I don't use banks that are real friendly for bank feeds. So we use a local community bank. And so the couple times that I've tried to set that up and set up my credit cards, we have issues getting it set up and then making sure we're in the screen. In the desktop version, there's two different kind of screens. It looks different. And I'll tell you, one of the things that drives me crazy about the bank feeds is that if it's a data file and I'm handwriting checks and I accidentally click a rule that says, oh, that check was Office Depot office expense, somehow all the checks from that point on for the rest of my entire life get coded to office expense. So I'm like, turn it off. And I know that, let's say I have 100 transactions and I only have 5 manual checks. I hate for it to be ruined over that.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
am I
that
doing
was
wrong, Dan?
yeah. So I think back in 2009, where so now you're dating yourself.
Yeah, I've been scared. I've got post-traumatic stress disorder over bank feeds. Help me understand
Right.
it.
Well, good news is that QuickBooks has actually created a rule not to create a rule based on that situation. So desktop actually now taking care of that problem because that's what happens is that the renaming rule that comes in from the bank feed will when there are um, generic issues like yeah, the cat decided
Cat's
to
coming
join
in.
us.
We have a mascot.
Yeah, he makes an appearance at least once a day. Um,
There we go.
but that's what happens is the bank feeds are dictated by what's being fed in, which is why they call them bank feeds from the financial institution. So many financial institutions for generic situations like that where it's a check, they can't put that information as far as the payee or any other detail, so they just put the word check as the bank fed information or the bank description into QuickBooks. So in originally what QuickBooks would do is it would see that and then rename everything with that name uh, to whatever you've modified it to inside of your QuickBooks. So just that scenario of what you just described of okay, now all my checks are Home Depot, and they're categorized to uh,
Repairs or
job
some kind of
supplies or
crazy.
repairs or whatever. That causes a problem. So ATM withdrawal, same thing, or
Yeah.
debit card purchase, which were very similar types of things. So now a desktop it does not do that. So it
Well,
will uh, it
then
will avoid creating a rule based on those generic informations that come in. So so you may want to try it again.
so there's one other thing I did learn though, Dan. I do have to pat myself on the back.
Okay.
So I know sometimes I get a little crazy with the rules, and I don't know what you maybe you can explain what happens when you do too many rules, but I did learn that I get excited. Let's say Exxon is the gas. And I know that's auto gas is how I do it. So I go, I say, save this rule, but the description within the bank feed is Exxon store number 6185 on something street. And then I'm like, why didn't it pick up the next Exxon? Because I went to a different one around the corner. And then I went to Texaco or Sunoco or whatever the different ones. So I learned, and you can see if there's something I'm doing wrong, I learned to back all that junk off the end and have it only look for Exxon or the word that makes us know it's gas. And so then it made that so much easier. It went ahead and recoded those. And that was a huge time saver. But my list, now I've got lists that looks for Exxon 61, 75, 89, and all those. It's now my list is sort of out of control. So what do I do now that I've made a mess of it?
So when you go into and edit the rules, what you can do is change the variable of what it's looking for. So you can have it just say contains, so you don't necessarily have to have all of that information. So you can just say it contains Exxon. So anytime it says Exxon in it, then the rule applies, and then it will, whatever your conditions are, then you can, or the actions to take based on that condition, then you can do that.
And the other thing that I did, another trick that I did trying to play with them was, like you said, there's a rule where you can say it not to recode those checks. Another trick that I did where it always said check is I coded it to ask my accountant, which after I would handle the bank feed, then I'd go back in and actually manually make those the right, go to the check register and find out what was the real date, because it's only going to slam it in there the date that the check came through.
Right.
So that takes care of the check side. And is that's the same theory in both versions, right? QBO
Yes.
as well.
Yeah. Now the rules
but the screens look different.
Yeah. Now the rules are in QuickBooks Online. The rules are a lot more robust than they are in desktop. With desktop, you pretty much can just categorize, and that's about it. In online, you can categorize, you can split, you can code to class, you can, so you have a lot more actions that you can actually take, and you can actually have it auto enter the transaction as well.
So the other difference I want to clarify, because I know that desktop is not as strong in this area, but can I set up desktop to, like, one thing that I really think that QBO is ahead of the game in is that when you log into QBO, bam, it's there. You can sleep and come in and the entries are there. In desktop, you can't. Can you set it up to be doing that for you, or is it still a manual, bring them in, verify your password and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it boils down to the connection types. So in the grand scheme of things, there are 3 ways to connect to your bank. One's called a web connect, one is called a direct connect, and then there's something in the middle called the express web connect. Now, QuickBooks Online uses that express web connect, where once you get the connection, it can go out and automatically do the update for you. There are some financial institutions in desktop who subscribe to the Express Web Connect. That doesn't mean that everyone does. So it's up to the financial institution to let QuickBooks know how it wants to connect to the version of QuickBooks. So desktop, you're going to have you could potentially have the 3 different connections: the Express Web Connect, the Web Connect, or the Direct Connect. Now, what's the difference between the Direct Connect and the Express Web Connect is the communication. So Web Connect is from the bank institution to QuickBooks. It's one way. You can't send an instruction from QuickBooks to the bank. That's where direct connection comes in, because it's a 2-way instruction. So one thing that QuickBooks can do in desktop with the bank feeds that QuickBooks Online can't do is send an instruction to the bank. So when you're paying bills, you can say it's an online payment as long as you're using the Direct Connect with your bank. It will then send that payment instruction to your bank and then pay your bill electronically that way. You can't do that from the bank feed in QuickBooks Online. There are other ways. There are other ways to pay your bills electronically in QuickBooks Online, and we know about those. But that's a whole nother workshop.
Right. Show off that for now.
Right. But there is that, Direct Connect. If your bank subscribes to that, it will allow you to send an online transfer or between your between your accounts. So if you're transferring checking to savings or savings to checking, you can send those instructions, create those instructions in QuickBooks, and then send them to your bank so it actually gets done for you. The challenge with the Direct Connect, there's usually a fee. So the bank, they just don't do this stuff for free. They want to, they want to fee you to death. So typically there's a bank cost associated with that.
But it gives you the ability to do. That gives you the ability to do transfers or pay bills, so that might be worth the fee,
right?
Versus using bill.com.
Right. Yeah, and then that will then allow you to do those things. So, getting back to your original question of so Direct Connect, you have to initiate the connection. So when you go to the bank feed, you click on update, it asks you for your password, and then it does multiple accounts. So if you have a Wells Fargo with 5 different accounts and you have them all set up with direct connection, it will then do all of them at once. Web Connect, when you initiate that from within QuickBooks Desktop, you have to go out to the financial institution, download the Web Connect file, and then import that that Web Connect file into your QuickBooks Desktop. Each account needs to do that individually. So if you have Wells Fargo with 6 accounts, you have to do that 6 times. You still have to go to the financial institution and initiate what the date range is. The Web Connect process, when it's in desktop, it will see that desktop is open and bring in those transactions for you, or at least it should. If we're dealing with a lot of accountants here that have multiple versions of QuickBooks and multiple clients, then that gets a little confusing because you have multiple versions of QuickBooks it doesn't know which version to go into. So then you end up having to download that file and import it manually. So
and that I've done that before, especially when you hit these small banks. And because it's created, and one of the questions it'll say, so you want to create this file to work with QBO. And I'm thinking, no, it's desktop. But guess what? That's the file you want.
Yeah.
And
it's got a QBO extension.
Right.
And then, you get confused as to, well, no, this is a desktop file, but it's got a QBO extension when I call QuickBooks Online QBO all the time. That's actually the Web Connect type of file for QuickBooks Desktop that will work with desktop.
Don't let that stop you. Yeah. So the bottom line of what we just discovered is, because QBO is so robust in bank feeds and they work really hard to make them fantastic, and we'll go through what makes it so much better, is that it actually fixed it for desktop. Because now, if you can't connect in those several ways you discussed, I can at least download that QBO type file and bring it in and update it. Now, one of the things that I wrote a note about that I struggled with in QBO, but I haven't had that problem in desktop, but I have in QBO, and you can tell me if it's a product problem. There was, when I first started getting into QBO and those bank feeds would go ahead and download, I'm like, and I had to go old school. I had to get my bank statement out and check it off. And I'm like, wait a minute, this whole string of transactions during this weird time frame came in again. And I'm used to desktop where I delete that stuff. And I'm like, and so my instruction was probably before I met you, Dan. So this might predate.
All
My
right.
instruction was, no, Carrie, you don't delete in QBO, you exclude, which is just like, wait, that's not what I know. So I was told that there can be hiccups in between the communication from the bank to QBO, and tell me if it's on desktop, where it will actually bring a series of duplicates in you have to be aware of and exclude them, because you can't delete them, or you can, but that's not, they like you to exclude. So you have to really have that, I know we don't want to print paper, but I can't help it. I have a stack over here. So is this a QBO type issue to be aware of? Or does it also happen? And because I haven't, but I admit I haven't done heavy bank feeds. I haven't seen it in desktop. Or is it a thing?
Well, yeah, the Web Connect file that's downloaded from the bank should check for duplicates before bringing in those transactions. Now, I say should because it doesn't always it doesn't always do that.
Yeah.
If you've ignored, that's the verbiage in desktop, because they don't want to use the same verbiage.
No, never. They want you confused.
Right. You ignore the transaction in QuickBooks Desktop. You exclude the transaction in QuickBooks Online,
But
but they do the same thing.
I like
Yeah.
delete. I want it
Yeah.
gone.
Ignore in desktop is deleting. Excluding puts them in a holding bin, and then you can delete them. You can exclude them permanently, so that would be deleting.
Okay.
So you can delete. It's just an extra
Okay.
step for you.
The terms just throw me off. What can I say?
But the advantage of not deleting them right away is you can undo what you've done. So, and you can't do that in desktop. So when you've done something, you can undo what you've done, and then it'll reverse what you've done. So it's kind of like a safety feature, a safety net to not have them permanently deleted. But that brings up, so the duplicates is actually getting a lot better in QuickBooks Online now that they have the problem that happened with the Express Web Connect process is that you're entering your information into QuickBooks Online about that bank, and then making a connection to the financial institution at the financial institution side of things. Banks are famous for changing their website. Or it could just be, I mean, they have good reason to. I mean, they want to protect their customer from fraudulent activity. So another program connecting to their bank, may smell like a fraudulent activity because it's not their customer physically logging into the bank's website, and all those tokens, and please select all the bicycles in this picture. The things that you have to jump through hoops in order to get to your financial institution's website. When QuickBooks is trying to connect that way, the bank can't tell whether it's QuickBooks or some guy in Pakistan, or trying to hack your financial institution's website. So the connection oftentimes got severed between QuickBooks and the bank feed, and that would oftentimes, then you'd have to disconnect and reconnect it again, and that's typically where the duplicates would come in, because then it looks like a brand new connection, and then it'll just go right back and download as much as it could, and because you've disconnected it, it doesn't have any way to know if those transactions were already downloaded again. So to solve that, what Intuit and the financial institutions are doing is creating a connection, and they call it OAuth, like the letter O and authenticate. And there's actually an article, and we'll put it in the comments here so you can get an idea of what that actually means. But instead of sending the login instructions to QuickBooks, it takes you to the bank's login site, and then you enter that login information, and then that feeds it back in, right? So if there's a change with your bank's connection, or you change your bank's password,
yeah,
that information is
broken again.
recorded, and it's not going to break the connection between
So,
QuickBooks Online and that.
so if
Yes.
I change my password,
Right.
I don't have to redo the QBO connection. It's still happy.
As long as those financial institutions are
Same
in
way.
this
Okay.
off,
off. Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
your
good.
local credit union is probably not going to be subscribed to that just yet. When you're connecting, it'll say we're going to take you to the bank's website, and then you're going to enter your login. So the big ones, the monster mega banks like Chase and Wells Fargo, Capital One, the U.S. Bank, those banks subscribe to that already, but your local, regional bank is probably not, in that type of situation. So then you're going to have I'm feeding that information from QuickBooks to the bank as far as my login is concerned, and may have that situation pop up.
And so my final question, since I'm learning a lot, is that the other day we were talking about something completely unrelated, and then you said, "Oh, guess what? Something really good happened," and and it has something to do with receipts, which is super cool. Oh, and
Yeah.
I do have another. Can we put that on a second?
Okay.
Before we go there, there's another thing to know. Deposits. So sometimes we see a lot of posts in Abo where we're like, what in the world is going on? We're duplicating all our deposits, and it's not matching up. And so what turns out to be happening is the bank feed's coming across. And if you're not using integrated solutions like QuickBooks Merchant Services, better with flowing the information. But if your customer or you're using Stripe or PayPal and the amount comes over and it has the fee deducted, those are ultimately can be dangerous, where you're duplicating income, and we don't want to pay tax on income that's duplicated. So what are some safeguards to prevent that, so you don't accidentally go income, and then but you've already recorded income somewhere else?
Yeah, typically that's what happens, is that the workflow is broken. The way I would explain it to people is like, the hip bone connected to the thigh bone, but sometimes people just go right into the thigh bone and forget the hip altogether.
Yeah.
But what happens is you create an invoice, record a payment, but you never deposit it, or you don't group it together, and then a deposit comes in from the bank feed, and somebody will just look at that and go, oh, well, that was payment, so it must be income. So now you've got an invoice recognizing your income, and you've got your deposit recognizing your income, and now your income's overstated. Now, the bank feed in QuickBooks Online actually allows you to match to outstanding deposits, which you can't do that in desktop. So that's yet another victory for for
I thought
QuickBooks
I'd seen
Online.
that in there. I might have to double check behind you. I saw that.
But if you have let's say you have an invoice that you never recorded the payment for, you can take that deposit and match it to the invoice, and then not have to enter in the payment.
Okay.
But you still need to recognize that that was for an invoice and try to match it. So it doesn't always, whoever's reviewing those transactions may just, it depends on what they do. If they just go add and it's income, then they've added it as income. But we have a blog article that that we can talk. We're going to enter in the chat or the comments so that you can see how do I remedy that when that has happened, because you have to go back into the transactions and reconcile them between the invoices, the open invoices, or the payments that haven't been recognized. So that's one thing, and we'll put that in there. And then you wanted to talk about the receipt capture.
Yes. So you were saying something was really cool about something's changed. So there's some new way that I can get receipts into QBO that also has something to do with how is all this connected to bank feeds? Why are we
Yeah.
even going there?
So I don't remember when it started. Maybe about last year. QuickBooks Connect, I think, is when I saw it start to roll out. Um, but receipt capture is something that it just it cause, you don't have to go. I mean, you can go paperless that way. Receipt capture allows you to take a receipt, snap a picture of it on your mobile device, and then that will go into your QuickBooks so that you can then either match it to an existing transaction or create a transaction from it, which will then match to your bank feed. So so you can categorize it ahead of time and then match it to your bank feed when the transaction actually does come in. The image actually gets scanned, and you can then modify the transaction before it actually gets matched by the bank feed. So one, you're going paperless. You're able to manage your books from a picture, which is pretty cool. But then there's receipt forwarding. So and this is a situation where you get, you go somewhere and they say, hey, do you want your receipt emailed to you? You don't actually get a paper receipt, or you order something from Amazon or any other online retailer, and they just email you a confirmation
Yeah.
of your receipt. So what you
Tons of
can
those.
do with what you can do with that is you can forward that receipt to an inbox, and then QuickBooks will then scan the receipt for you and then put it in the receipt capture section in your bank feeds, and then you manage it just like you did if you took a picture of it. So there's a small change, and it's nothing earth shattering, but they used to have a centralized inbox of receipts at QuickBooks.com, and that's where you would just forward the receipt to from your inbox. So if you get a receipt sent to you in your email, you would then forward that to receipts at QuickBooks.com, and then it would then show up in your receipt section in the bank feed. Well, now because there's so many businesses out there that are doing that, you now have to put in your own personal email address unique to your business. So, for example, if we're using school bookkeeping, we would have to create an inbox called schoolofbookkeeping.com or school of bookkeeping at whatever the address is for that particular company. And then you would receive, we would forward it to that address
I have a
only for
receipt,
that
you
business.
have a receipt, and we would use that. We
Right.
could use the same email. Okay.
Right.
And then it lands in QBO or whatever, and then we have to say that this receipt goes with this expense, and then we're done.
Exactly. So
Sounds pretty cool to me.
if you have multiple clients, on your QBO, if you're an accountant and you have like 10 clients and they're using that, then you just need to set up you just specify what email address that's going to be sent to for each particular company. You can't just send it all to receipts at QuickBooks.com. It's now going to be client 1 at QuickBooks.com and client 2. And then you'll be able to send the receipt forwarding.
So before this was added, did you send it to just one big old bulk thing, or it just didn't have the option to worry about these?
It was all receipts at QuickBooks.com. So, let's say
The
there's
accountants were they were probably their and then you wouldn't know which one to code it to. I gotcha. So that's a big win. So I learned a lot here. I think I'm still going to make you check my rules and figure it out.
Right. So we'll put in the blog article, and we just recently at schoolbookkeeping.com did a whole course on the QBO bank feeds. So if you wanted to review anything that we talked about here today about what you can do in QuickBooks Online with the bank feeds, and eventually we'll get everything in as far as what you can do with desktop as well, but starting with QuickBooks Online first, and then we'll add in the desktop as well. So we'll put that in the comments and hopefully continue the conversation about saving time with the bank feeds. And we will see you next week.
Sounds great.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.